No matter whether it's local, regional, or national, when people in Texas are asked about the #1 priority facing their area, it is always transportation. I'm Jim Forsyth, and welcome to On the Record, an unrehearsed weekly discussion on the challenges and opportunities which face us here in San Antonio and South Texas. And joining us today is the man with the answers, the titan of traffic, the chairman of the Texas Transportation Commission, San Antonio Bank executive, J. Bruce Bugg, Jr. Bruce, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Jim, for inviting us. I'm very honored to be here.
You have a very, very ambitious goal. It has been almost 19 years since the state went through a single day without a traffic fatality.
Yes, sir.
You have a goal of eliminating traffic fatalities by 2050, a mere 31 years. Talk a little bit about what your vision is behind that and how that could happen.
Well, the whole vision is really centered in TXDOT. The whole motto is safety is job #1. And I want to credit Commissioner Laura Ryan, who really emphasized to me the importance of she said, most people think this is an impossible task, and we're going to take it on foursquare. And so we're going to have our Unified Transportation Program review at our August meeting on August 29th. What we are proposing to do is put $600 million into safety for a 2-year kind of a surge focus on safety throughout the state of Texas. And let me tell you why, and let me, if I may, give you a couple of objective goals as to what we have in mind. Number one, as you just correctly stated, it's been 19 years since we've gone without any fatality on our Texas highway system. We think that's unacceptable. And so we believe that $600 million, which is what I propose in the UTP to be spent for safety over the next 2 years, will go a long way towards trying to jumpstart this goal towards 0 fatalities by 2050. And so how we're going to do it is we're going to try to do our part, but the driving public has to do their part. And so it's a sad commentary that 3,600 people lost their lives on average over the last several years. And so the program is going to be focused on the fact that there is the National Transportation Highway System basically came out with a statistic that said that 94% of crashes are preventable. So let's start with that basic premise. 94% of crashes are preventable. So you pull back the onion on that and you look at why do we have so many crashes that lead to so many fatalities in Texas. And what that really is, it's a shared responsibility. TXDOT, what we're going to spend our money on is better striping. We're going to try to straighten out roads that there might be curves where people kind of lose their control. So what we're going to do is a deep dive through our 25 TXDOT districts throughout the state on what can we do to improve highway safety in all of those areas and give them the money to do it. But when I said it's a shared responsibility, it really comes back to that person behind the wheel. And Jim, unfortunately, 30% of our fatalities are related to drinking and driving. That's the #1 fatality. Secondly, we have still, even though you and I get in our car and we start the engine and it starts beeping if we don't have our seatbelt on, a full 25% of the fatalities are related to people that don't wear their seatbelts. And then I think the kind of the emerging trend is it's called distracted driving, but you and I both know it's people that are glued to their iPhone as they're driving down the highway. I can tell you from personal experience that I spend a lot of time in Austin now. I tell my wife I have a dual citizenship, Austin and San Antonio, because our headquarters, of course, is in Austin. And I can tell you, Jim, and you've probably seen the same thing, but as I drive from San Antonio up I-35 to Austin, I'll see this weaving pattern. And invariably, and I'm kind of curious now because we are focused on this new program for safety, is this person really looking at their iPhone? And invariably, Jim, I'll pull up alongside because I try to pass those people. I pull up alongside and they're doing one of these things. They're looking at their iPhone, one hand on the steering wheel. That has to stop. And of course, it's illegal, but it's hard to enforce that. So I get back to trying to get to 0 deaths by 2050 is going to be a shared responsibility between TXDOT, and we're going to do our part, but the driving public has to do their part.
Are we beyond the toll road debate? Are toll roads essentially extinct as far as new construction?
Well, I think the toll road debate really is centered on the fact that in 2014, the Texas voters went to the polls and by a margin of 80% approval, they approved constitutionally mandated funding that is essentially grounded in the severance taxes, the oil and gas taxes, would be dedicated for transportation, but it's constitutionally mandated for non-tolled projects. That began a conversation that led to, in November of 2015, the Texas voters went back to the polls. You would think they'd be a little fatigued from just a year before voting in favor of how their taxes are going to be allocated for transportation. But as you said in the very beginning of your remarks, everyone talks about transportation. So the voters came back to the Texas polls in November of 2015, and by a margin of 83%, they approved additional funding called Proposition 7 for transportation. That was also constitutionally mandated for non-tolled roads. Between those two initiatives, we now are going to be considering a $77 billion, what I call a construction budget. It's the UTP that I referred to earlier, as a 10-year plan on how we can basically advance projects. And those monies are going to be used for non-tolled projects.
What about, it seems like for the last 30 years there's been a heckler's veto over any sort of light rail or any sort of transportation plan that doesn't involve rubber on concrete. Right. Our mutual friend Tullis Wells fought the good fight for years to try to create light rail between San Antonio and Austin. It didn't work. Right. After what happened in California with their horrible boondoggle with high-speed rail, is high-speed rail and rail projects generally over?
Well, first of all, you know, Tullis and I are very good friends. He may deny that he's a friend of mine, but I'll claim Tullis is a good friend of mine. And Tullis did work very hard on high-speed rail between San Antonio and Austin. Of course, for all the reasons that we don't have time to go into right now, it just didn't work out. Your question about high-speed rail, let me give you a quick overview of how our revenues are used. So I get this question all the time. Why don't you be more in favor of advancing mass transit with your TXDOT dollars? Well, the short answer is that we are, about 98% of our funding goes for surface transportation projects, highways. And that's federally mandated, that's state mandated. And so, first of all, our funding streams are mandated for surface transportation. That's point number one. Point number two, about 2 to 3% of our revenues are federal sourced, but they are for transit like VIA in San Antonio. So we basically allocate, we get funding from the federal government that we basically give to transit authorities such as VIA and pay for the buses and things like that. The short answer of how can we get more rail funding in the state of Texas would be federally sourced, because those transit dollars are federally sourced. But right now, Jim, it's unbelievable to have to tell you this, but the federal transit dollars are still blocked on the year 2000 population trends, and those monies are basically in the Northeast Corridor and the state of California.
We'll have to leave it there. J. Bruce Bugg is the chairman of the Texas Transportation Commission. He's the man with his hands on the wheel when it comes to transportation projects in Texas. Bruce, thank you very much for joining us here.
Jim, thank you.